Hi, everyone. Today, Don and I we are going to talk about data ontologies from business perspective. Don is our uh, distinguished data architect, and I'm the director of product management for data governance. The first part, let me share slides. All right. The first part of our talk is going to be about which rule you have and what rules need to be followed from your business and from your organization perspective. It is important to know which rule you should follow from your organization perspective. It is beyond the data cataloging.
And managing the business, of course, is just as important as managing the data itself. Understanding how traditional data processes are getting updated or being created as new processes within a data ecosystem globally intersect with data management. This thing is an absolute imperative. We need to be able to connect the business back to technology and data.
We are going to talk about how to organize your business to manage data. Data management is not going to be successful without considering to the how to connect to the business and context of that.
So let's get some definitions out of the way first. We want to make sure that all of this is in context of what we're trying to talk about. So when we say data ontologies, really that means describing the relationships between different areas. That can be areas of the business, areas of policy, areas of technology. And taxonomies really are just effectively dictionaries of the business or of aspects of the business. These might be policy-based or based on organizational structure or external policies and laws. And the next definition around interrogatives, I assume everyone knows what these are, but just stating it for face value here. Interrogatives are the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And as we talk about them, these things are about data. And so we need to know the interrogatives of data. And we need to understand how they relate to data management.
The middle section is about perspective. We have a different perspective within an organization, as this can influence how data is consumed and generated. It is important how to manage these viewpoints from the different business perspective. Data is viewed differently by various actors, such as a user, engineering, and policy owner. Understanding this perspective is crucial for fulfilling various needs within your organization.
And next definitions are around architecture. And so I'm an architect, I think like an architect, I try to act like an architect on occasion. These definitions are important to understand to make sure that we have a clear path for developing data management strategies and processes that are related to the business. Purpose at the top can be both perspective-based, but is also directional. You need to understand which direction something is going. So if I'm working with an executive, I want to make sure that I understand their purpose for wanting data management and not just technology for technology's sake, as well as understanding the purpose of the data management that we want to include specific executives in. The next piece is the elements of the architecture, which obviously are crucial to understand. You need to know how things relate within the architecture and the elements that are being provided and the gaps that are there as well. Incoming and outgoing dependencies is next. We need to understand the scope of work that needs to be done with external business partners as well as technology partners. And finally, the roles. These are imperative to managing the architecture as well, because some teams will need more or less access to information or provide more information. And so the role that they play is vital. And we'll get more deep into that here in a minute. Go ahead.
Data management initiatives. From the initiative perspective, we use a couple of codes that have been told from our leaders how to manage the data. The first code is you must know where every byte is in the company. So this is our direction how to manage the data. Means discovery of a data is a foundation of your data management and also should be the technology driven and unsupervised.
And the next quote that we have, which both of these quotes are real, they came to us initially in our journey, is about working ourselves out of a job, which effectively means automating everything. So automating along the way is mandated by our leadership. And after a few years that we've been on this path, we know that we've done a lot to automate everything, but we haven't done everything that we can. And so there's always a little bit more that systems know. There's a little bit more that people know that have to introduce things to systems. And the more they know, the more we end up knowing. And so there's always a balance between what people know and what systems know. We have to continue working in those small surface areas of knowledge that lead us to those edge cases within the processes to get a complete picture for automation. This next slide is about the business perspective, and it's meant to be an eye chart. It is not meant to be prescriptive, it's illustrative. So on the blue section, these are technology leaders. The red section are business product teams. The vaguely purple section at the bottom is our legal partners. The two in the middle are CEO and CTO. The brown and green are our finance and customer service teams. They all have input into this, and there's basically 3 blocks for each person that we interviewed that give us their perspective. And the first block is really, what are the things that you care about? Why are you here? The next piece is the opportunity, and then last piece is the risk. And so we want to know from their perspective, as well as knowing what their partners think of all of those things. And if someone's not available for one of these direct interviews, by the way, it's always a good idea to get this done, to just put yourself in their shoes and imagine what that conversation would be, so that you have a way of setting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what the company is doing, this is where we are, and this is where we're going. And this will help define the gaps in the roadmap moving forward.
The next is people and process and then technology. The key here is understanding the importance of considering people and process before introducing any technology. They understand the workflow, managing automation and workflow orchestration as a fundamental concept of their work. The workflow should be the central focus, with technology being used to augment the process instead of being a main solution. New technology should be incorporated with the business process and to avoid a failure. The either solution you're choosing for your organization, it should be meet your requirement from the people and process you have in the whole structure of your company. Then why we need a data governance? Data governance is not enforcement function. Data governance is here to support the business and is not just risk avoidance measure function. Data governance can help a lot of policy-driven function inside of the company to enable the business. An example we can say here is data governance can build a very good process to how to manage a third-party data sharing, the data we are sharing outside of the company, either they are processor or controller of a data, but how this technology can help them, the organization, from a different perspective, from legal perspective, from the privacy perspective, from the security perspective, and how we can validate against the contract and other policies we have in a company. The next is about the different roles and stakeholders we have in data management. In data management, we should consider all, not only one. The needs from different stakeholders and roles are not the same. The goal is to manage the data for a different perspective. One of my favorite example is here is privacy has a concern about the personal data and deletion. But meanwhile, you have record retention information management team, they want to retain the data. How we are going to balance these needs and requirement and also meet the regulatory and obligations are the key how you're managing your data. And remember, all this be technology driven, not the manual one.
The next is about data ownership and stewardship. This has slightly changed over the last probably decade, and it continues to move in the direction of the business driving the data management process instead of the other way around. So aligning data alignment around things like data mesh or data fabric are becoming an important aspect of managing the data for the business when technology is being applied as an architectural component. Ensuring alignment between the business and the technology, obviously related to domains and organizations, becomes a challenge when performing changes within the company. And so things change. You have to be aware and ready for that. The strategies around managing organizational changes are needed to keep track of where the data is moving within the organization and when strategies shift.
Policy management. Policy management is going to be more complex as we are getting more laws and obligations from legislators, from different countries, from different states, from all over the world, especially if your company is a global in company. And in any company, you have a different policy taxonomies or for privacy, for security, and legal. But the key is how we connect all these taxonomies and overcome to the challenge of balancing and managing different policy requirement. This should be also, again, technology driven. If the security is going to change the classification of the data, and the privacy also has a different definition for a new classification, that should be managed in whole enterprise, and also should be well notified to all the data owner. Business context and sourcing the catalog. In our catalog, we have all internal and external data, but how we connect to the business and business context is a big step for us. And we also need to know how emerging technologies and trends for data impact us, and also how that connects to our traditional data management function. This can be the big challenge for any company, especially with a lot of legacy data and application they have.
So let's get down into the weeds a little bit here and talk a little bit about each area that we've spoken about already and some emerging technologies. This first part of the session, we're going to talk about how the business is influenced by externalities like new laws, like know your data concepts from those laws, or making sure that we can internalize some of that into matching the business expectations. So the top bit about traceability, well, you can have traceability for completeness, which means you know how data got to where it needs to be. You also have it for justification, and those two things are kind of at separate ends of the spectrum, right? It's about managing lineage, but from which direction? And I talked about directedness before. We need to understand root cause analysis, which is one direction, and we need to understand how we got the answer that we got, which is the other direction. So knowing and understanding that is a key to managing your data and the influence of that over the business. Observability for process like monitoring or alerting or analytics as examples of that are also part of how we need to deal with the business. Observability into data management and governance processes also needs to think about how we need to monitor change most importantly. We also need to monitor and alert on orders of magnitude differences of volume or errors occurring within orchestration of the consumption of the metadata. We also need to be able to remind the business that these changes are occurring and need to be able to act on these changes if they're unintended. Explainability is where the business needs the most input for these elements because it's from their lens that they're interpreting what's happening within the system. And we also need to ensure that we think we're being transparent about the whole metadata, what it represents, so that they can understand where the data resides clearly and can also explain what is going on. The last two are business attributes and metrics. They kind of fit hand in hand in that the attributes described by the business as important to them are functionally accounted for in the metrics that are provided related to the metadata being captured. along the ways of measuring success of the business attribute defined. So how these things connect and how the business is functionally working are those two last aspects of traceability and observability. Next is data mesh and fabric concepts. Obviously, they're not the same, but they have some similarities, and people talk about them in the same context often. And so we want to bring them up together. The top 4 bullets are really driven by mesh. The bottom 5 are about fabric. They aren't exclusive or inclusive of data mesh and data fabric concepts together, but we often commingle them as different concepts when we're using data management concepts. So data mesh is the higher level use of the architecture, whereas data fabric is more foundational sets of features needed to manage data at scale. However, things like autonomy can be fulfilled by both. Where needed, we can make sure that we understand the why behind why each is important to knowing where to apply data management and governance in each instance. So if we think about autonomy itself, we're talking about making sure that we have automated things in a self-service way. We're talking about integration, making sure that we can easily integrate between these different data sources and data sets. If we're talking about decentralization, that's giving a lot of ownership back to the business, and they need to understand what that means to own that data. And finally, domain agnostic, which means we're not just focused on a single domain within the process or even a couple domains, but all domains.
The last 5 topics are about the data fabric. Data fabric is an enterprise-wide function or horizontal platform that involves workflow management and resource management at enterprise level. The both methods have a different approach to the resource management, and understanding this difference is crucial. Either approach, either fabric or mesh, can be used, but it should meet your business requirement. Or you can go to some hybrid. You can build your catalog with the fabric concept, but then domain can enable data with the mesh solution. But all is depends on your organization structure and what your business needs. Zero trust architect. There is a symbolic relation always between the data governance and zero trust architect. Resources and entitlements are the core of the zero trust and what they can provide, and how data governance is going to connect to the data governance, and how data governance is going to manage these resources is the key. The key point is here how we connect resources, let's say application, user, or batches in your company level, to the right ownership, policy, and purpose of processing to abstract the data usage and then validate against policy. If you have a payment data and the payment data must be used by only payment domain in your organization based on a privacy notice agreement and also purpose of processing, how you are going to validate these policies by technology, it's a crucial integration between zero trust and zero trust architect and data governance platform should be in place. Next is about data ownership and stewardship. We have different type of ownership in company, from business perspective, from technology perspective, and also from legal and et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea is managing change across between these categories and their taxonomy. The change management between each category and the taxonomy, and how to apply the change to the dependent taxonomy, it's a key here to how to manage this ownership part. An example is in corporate, we have a lot of organization change. How we are going to be sure with organization change is data ownership is not going to be impacted. How we are going to be sure data on the new function and domain is meeting and reflecting the new policies they need to follow, and how is also going to be automated with the minimum supervised operation. Another example here is which in last couple of months is highlighted everywhere, is a responsible AI. Responsible AI is from the technology perspective is owned by AI team, but From data perspective, we see still data, and data governance is responsible to manage that data. Responsible AI is going to introduce new piece to your business ontology. A lot of new policies is coming, new process coming, and introducing a lot of new attributes and the method. Their metadata is completely different than a traditional metadata we have for tables, for columns, and how your platform has been designed and built to be flexible to do these changes and also manage the new workflow and process is key here to manage change between the different taxonomies you have.
So for policy management, obviously we're doing this from a data architecture perspective, but we also want to talk about, from an architecture perspective, the things that matter to architects, like contextual and conceptual and logical and physical components. Contextual components are the things that are external to your company. These are the things that influence your policy, like laws and regulations, or jurisdictional policy, or even public perception, or even cultural norms. The thing that we need to know about how externalities are affecting our governance policies, and also realize that we need to be able to pivot on new laws or policies. That means we all know that the laws can change without notice and without any recommendation from the business. And how do we interpret that? And how is it applied? The business has as much control over those things as data managers do. And of course, governance becomes a side effect of these changes. And we need to make sure that we can have a good policy management strategy that can adjust to changes from contextual area of the world. The other areas that are conceptual are the inside relationships of those laws as they change. So when we go from context to concept, our internal teams have to understand what those things mean, how they are reacting, what things we need to change within the business to account for those things, and especially if we have a delivery from that, like a subject access request or a deletion process that needs to occur for a right to erasure request. So we need to build in flexibility into the processes that we know can change. We also need to account for internal changes, such like we talked about public perception changes, that we need to adjust our policies for not only data governance, but for things that are related to privacy or security or audit or records information management, or even our own internal data management policies. We also have a lot of partner teams that we need to implement their own pieces of policies for rules that are applied to the business that we need to understand. And as Habib talked about, zero trust architectures is one of those things where we have to partner with somebody to make sure that we're managing all of these things. So we also have partner teams that not only need to do this from a technology perspective, but also by the business. So for instance, at eBay, we need to understand where rules are applied and where they aren't. So sometimes rules are applied on a front-end application using business logic, and sometimes those things are done in ETL. We need to understand those things. So working closely with the dependent teams obviously is crucial to ensuring a straightforward handoff between teams that need to manage policy. I'll let Habib go on this next one.
Okay. What is the outcomes of data governance? There are a couple of key points we are going to talk about how we see the outcome of data governance. The first bullet is talking about ownership, stewardship, and oversight of them. The most important part of data governance is to define ownership principle at enterprise level and distinguish it from stewardship. How you are going to build ingestion logic in your catalog and how you're going to assign ownership. And for a different data store, how Oracle is working is different than from Hive, and how Hive is working from any new object stores. So that's crucial to your managing ownership in your company. And also, it is important you not rely to the person. Employees coming and going, leaders coming and going, but still data ownership should be clarified in this organization. Stakeholder ownership is the second bullet about stakeholder and sponsorship management. Important part about stakeholder management is understanding their perspective, understanding their perspective from their organization and also connected to the business context, policies, rules, and with technology. The way policy owner privacy see the data in the enterprise is different than a security team. Security team has a concern about protecting data, about restricted data and confidential data, how to manage. But meanwhile, privacy has concern how personal data should be deleted, and also other organization wants to keep it. That's that part, and connecting all this viewpoint via workflow and also technologies, it's important.
And for bullet 3, standards and policy management, which we've been talking about all along, imagining it from a business perspective, though, standards and policies tend to be a hindrance to their velocity for getting things done. Obviously, automating things where possible within testing phases, or ensuring that things like CI/CD pipelines can take advantage of metadata capture along within the catalog itself, is related to policy and standard. And data governance introduces a way to help manage those things along with the business. Now, the next bullet is about data activation. I think Salma talked a little bit about this and ROI in her opener. Data activation is really about using the catalog of information so that it's collected in a way that we haven't really envisioned before. We can leverage that metadata not only to ensure compliance, obviously, first and foremost, but we also want to make sure that we're that this is about managing simple things like automating data discovery or sampling information, or even using it as a tool to enable other services like looking for entropy in encrypted values, or tokenizing data from a privacy perspective related to these data elements. These are all examples of how the catalog can be used and extended to help data activation. And then ROI is next, ROI and valuation. ROI and valuation of data is obviously difficult. A lot of companies treat data management processes as a cost center. This is not something that we want to just be a cost center, making sure that we're storing data, keeping it safe, managing it effectively, but also being able to use that metadata to enable the teams that are managing their catalogs. And so it's important to remember that data management and data governance are not just risk avoidance measures, but also be proactive in building a portfolio of tools that allow teams to manage and leverage that data within these catalogs to increase the velocity of the business, which means pushing towards integration layers.
The next bullet is the retention and deletion. The important part of data life cycle management is first retention and then deletion. We need to have comprehensive record retention taxonomy in an enterprise level, and it should cover all type of data you have, for transactional data, temporary data, or work data. The key is it should cover all type of data, and then it should be understandable by data owner how to use it, and when they until when they retain it, and then delete it. The next item is about auditing and fair information practice principle. Auditing is one of the key services inside of the data governance we should consider, and how we are going to audit against rules and policies. But auditing and policy validation should be, again, technology driven, and it should be very unsupervised and managed proactively for each organization and business for defined policies, what you know. And you cannot be proactive for what you don't know, but the catalog is a source of the truth and information for ownership, policies, retention, usage, and lineage. Then it is all about how you implement in your organization with the mindset of unsupervised, and with a smart way to provide the business and the data owner about their compliance status.
And the last 2 bullets, we're going to talk about obfuscation for certain data types. We know that this is kind of a mandatory function. Obfuscation doesn't just mean hashing or things like that. It can mean many different ways of doing that. But however, that's not the end of the story. We need to make sure that teams that are using the data have a purpose. Obfuscating data for teams that want a canonical form of the data is the best way to use or to allow data use without allowing data leakage from the catalog itself. And finally, information and decision principles. And again, this is from Seiner's book, Non-Invasive Data Governance. It's important to recognize all along the way we have quoted books and materials and research that have been done in this area so that you can use this later. So information and decision principles are the foundation by which the platform performs its function. Without these principles, we have a lack of transparency for the business, and it makes it more difficult to maintain an understanding of whether we're meeting the needs of the business or not. Adhering to the principles is easier if they're written down and agreed upon by the business stakeholders. Let the business tell you what they think the principles are or should be. Augment where necessary, but remain true to the business need and principles that they think you should be operating under. And that is the whole talk. Thank you for listening.